Welcome to Mad Cat English. Today's lesson is on comparisons with as. My name is Maria and I'll be your teacher today, so let's get started. First, let's think of the 4 seasons. We have spring, then comes summer, then autumn, and finally winter. Now let's think of some adjectives we can use to describe these seasons. Well, all of them can be described as beautiful. Some can be described as cold, some warm, and some hot. So now let's take a look at how we can put all of this information together using comparisons with as. For example, if we think of the adjective beautiful, which season comes to mind? I think many people will think of spring, but some other people will also think of autumn. So we can say autumn is as beautiful as spring. This suggests that autumn and spring are equally as beautiful. Now let's think of which season is hot. Well, it's very easy to think of summer. However, with winter, it's the opposite. So to express this, we can use the same sentence pattern, except we include the negative. Winter is not as hot as summer, and this tells us that winter is cold while summer is hot. It's also possible to add emphasis and more meaning to our sentence pattern as. We can also say autumn is just as beautiful as spring. Using just adds emphasis to say that autumn and spring are equally beautiful. Spring is not quite as warm as summer. This tells us that spring is less warm than summer, but that the difference is small. We can also say late autumn is almost as cold as winter. This is the same idea in that late autumn is less cold than winter and that the difference is small. But please notice here that when we use almost, the sentence is affirmative. So do not use the negative not when using almost. We can also say winter is not nearly as hot as summer. Here we use not nearly to express a big difference between the subject and object of the sentence. Winter is cold, whereas summer is very, very hot. Not nearly expresses that difference. Let's try it out. Take a look at the 2 pictured items and use the given adjective to form a comparative sentence using as. Our first adjective is dangerous. If we think of an animal that's dangerous, there are many, but one that comes to mind is a tiger. Now, another animal that's not dangerous at all is a kitten. How do we use a comparison with as to express the difference between a kitten and a tiger? We can say a kitten is not as dangerous as a tiger. But in this situation, the difference is big. So if we want to express that big difference, we can say a kitten is not nearly as dangerous as a tiger. Let's try again using the adjective exciting. If we think about sports, again, many sports are exciting, but here in the United States, many people think basketball is exciting. However, in many places around the world, people think soccer is exciting. So because many people think that both soccer and basketball are exciting, we can say soccer is as exciting as basketball. If we want to add emphasis to that, we can say soccer is just as exciting as basketball. So these have been some examples using comparisons with as with adjectives. However, it's also possible to use them with adverbs. If we think of someone who sings beautifully, we might think of Mariah Carey. If we think of someone who cooks well in your family, you might think of your mother. And if you think of an animal that runs fast, we might think of a cheetah. Now, all of these words in bold describe the verb that comes before it. Therefore, they are adverbs. So now let's see how we use this as sentence pattern with adverbs. Again, we have Mariah Carey, and we know she sings beautifully. But she's not the only one. Ariana Grande also sings beautifully. So to express this, we can say Ariana sings just as beautifully as Mariah. We also just said that your mother cooks well. Well, she's probably not the only person in the family who cooks. Maybe sometimes your father cooks as well. But does he cook as well as your mother? Well, maybe not. So to express this small difference, we can say, my dad cooks almost as well as my mom. Or we can say, my dad doesn't cook quite as well as my mom. Here we need to notice that cook is the main verb of the sentence. And because it's being used in the simple present, we need to follow the rules for forming a negative in the simple present. Therefore, the not part of not quite is combined with the helping verb does. So once again, we see my dad doesn't cook quite as well as my mom. Now we all know that cheetahs run fast. People also run, but it's very unlikely that a human can ever run as fast as a cheetah. In fact, this is a big difference. So we can say, a person doesn't run nearly as fast as a cheetah. Now let's try it out. Once again, we will take a look at the two pictures and then use the given verb and adverb to make a comparison. Let's start with write neatly. If you think about people who usually write neatly, you might think of teachers. And people who usually don't write neatly at all, doctors. So we put this together by saying, doctors don't write as neatly as teachers. If we want to express the big difference, we can say, doctors don't write nearly as neatly as teachers. Now let's try again with dress stylishly. People who usually dress stylishly might be models. However, they're not the only ones. Other people who often dress stylishly are actresses. So to put this together using a comparison with as, we can say actresses dress as stylishly as models. And if we want to emphasize that they dress equally stylishly, we can say, actresses dress just as stylishly as models. So now that we have an idea of how to use comparisons with as, and adjectives and adverbs, let's take a moment to correct the mistakes in the comparisons using as. Reading as relaxing as watching TV. The correct way to say this is, reading is as relaxing as watching TV. It's very easy to forget to use the be verb when using as. However, we still need a main verb, so we do need to use the be verb. The sun is not nearly as hot as the moon. The correct way to say this is, the moon is not nearly as hot as the sun. We need to put our subject and object in the correct place in order to express the difference between them. Gorillas not quite as live long as elephants. The correct way to say this is, gorillas don't live quite as long as elephants. This is a mistake I see very commonly with students when they are trying to use as with adverbs. Again, we need to realize that the main verb still needs to follow the rules of forming negatives according to the verb tense it's being used in. So that was our brief introduction to using comparisons with as. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. My name is Maria, and if you have any questions about this or any other grammar points, you can always email me at madcatenglish@gmail.com or leave a comment or question in the comments below. And Mad Cat wishes you mad English. See you for the next lesson. Thank you.